In this series, my team of experts and I will walk you through every step of the surrogacy journey, from your first application all the way through birth and recovery. Over the past 5 years, we've helped hundreds of women through their own surrogacy journeys, and countless intended parents reach their dream of parenthood. Surrogacy is my life's passion. It's one of the most selfless and life-changing gifts a woman can offer another family. But it's also complex and emotional. That's why we've created this series, to educate, empower, and help you feel confident in each phase of the journey here at Alcea. Whether this is your first journey or not, there's so much to learn, and we're here to support you every step of the way. This video covers pre-matching and matching. The first thing you should do when thinking about your pre-match and matching process is educate yourself. Alcea has created an entire manual regarding matching. It breaks down certain scenarios and questions. It also reminds you that it's okay to not know what you don't know. This is a new process, and so a lot of the education resources that we have for you on Facebook, on YouTube, in the ebook below, are all to prepare you for the match meeting and the pre-match process. So please educate yourself, get involved in the community that we've created, and ensure that you truly understand so you can ask the right kind of questions, not only in your pre-match consultation, but also in your match meeting when you're meeting your potential intended parents. The pre-match consultation at Alcea is actually something that is unique. A lot of agencies do not do an in-depth pre-match consultation like what we facilitate here. We have Mira, who is our matching coordinator, and her sole responsibility at the agency is to meet with every surrogate and every intended parent that is waiting. The purpose of this exercise is to really dig into what you're looking for in your intended parents. I want to stress that this is a safe space. Any kind of question that you'd like to ask, anything that you'd like to know about what type of intended parent or what would be expected of you by an intended parent, nothing is off the table. Feel free to ask those questions. Some of the topics that we're going to cover are, do you care if your intended parents are married or partnered? Are you open to working with a single parent? Are you open to working with a queer parent or a queer single person? Alcea has a few trans couples in our pipeline. Would you be open to working with someone who is trans? There are also some infectious disease concerns. Now, embryos that test positive for these infectious disease are still safe for surrogates, but surrogates are often trepidatious about having those types of embryos transferred into their uterus. And so you'll make decisions about whether or not you're open to that type of arrangement. We have some intended parents that are HIV positive. And in today's society and with the medications available, they live a completely normal life, and it's a risk-free environment for you as a surrogate, but not everyone is comfortable with that. We're going to talk about demographics, religion, geography, and we're going to end with what's most important to a lot of surrogates, compensation. So we're going to go through not only what you expect in base compensation, but we're going to go through lost wages, your support system, and how much your childcare costs. But most importantly, we're going to get to know you at a very intentional level. We want to understand what kind of communicator you are, how you resolve conflict. Are you more of a type A or type B personality? What kind of relationship are you looking to foster with your intended parents? This conversation is incredibly important because we are only as good as the information we have about you. And Mira wants to put all of those puzzle pieces together in the most effective way. On the intended parent side, we are asking these same kinds of questions. Some of the things that we talk to intended parents about are where you live geographically. They're going to need to travel there for the labor and delivery. We want to see and understand what their litmus is for how far away you live from them. Are you in a blue or a red state, one that's abortion or not abortion friendly? They often care if a surrogate's partnered. They're very curious about a surrogate's support system, what they do for a living, all of these things. They often talk about relationship, what kind of relationship they'd like to have with you during the pregnancy and after the pregnancy. We also talk about just basic demographics and just all of the kind of personality components that they'd like to see in their surrogate partner. All in, the point of this exercise for both the intended parent and the surrogate is to walk away with 2 lists. One list is a mandatory list. That is all of the things that you have determined are mandatory in your intended parents. And Alcea is committed to not showing you any profile that doesn't meet any of those mandatory ideas. We're also going to have a nice to have list. Of course, there is no perfect candidate out there, but we're going to try to get as many of those nice to haves as possible so that you can really have a well-rounded an amazing intended parent partner that really meets the needs and expectations you had of this process. Once the pre-match consultation is done, your profile is solid, and you've decided on all of your compensation, Alcea is going to vet your current insurance and understand if the insurance policy that you have, if applicable, is surrogacy friendly. If it is, wonderful. That's something that we can tell your intended parents, and there's no further work needed. If it isn't, we're going to work with you to determine the laws of your state and find the best possible way to cover you for medical insurance, not only during the IVF process, but during the pregnancy. But this work is going to be done in what we call the pre-match phase of the process. Once this is complete and we're ready to exchange profiles, it's time to hopefully see your perfect match. Once you've been provided with a profile of an intended parent that you could see yourself working with, now it's time for Mickey. Mickey's going to prepare you for the match meeting, facilitate the match meeting, and ensure that you have ample time to ask the questions of your potential partner so that you can walk away from that meeting to make a decision as to whether or not you'd like to carry their baby. What an exciting proposition. Mickey, tell us a little bit about yourself and the match meeting as a whole.
Hi, I'm Mickey, and I conduct all the match meetings here at Alcea. Excited to teach you guys and discuss all about match meetings and what to expect for a successful experience. Once your records have been approved from your intended parent's IVF clinic, then I am contacted and it's time to schedule your match meeting.
And this is the first financial obligation that an intended parent has at Alcea. Once we're scheduling the match meeting, we will have all intended parents pay Mickey for her clinical experience to facilitate and host that match call. And you will also be paying for your own background check to secure and ensure that you are a safe candidate to be an intended parent.
So I'll be sending you an email, and what's really important is that once you receive my email to schedule your match meeting, we need to do that within about 5 to 7 days. So I'll ask you for your days and times and best hours and try to coordinate with 1 or 2 other people and their schedules. So sometimes this can be real easy and sometimes it can be a little complicated. So the more flexibility that you have on weekends, evenings, mornings, lunch hours.
And I really can't stress enough that during the surrogacy process end to end, it's important that you're responsive. But in this piece of the process, you have to be checking your email, you have to be checking your text, yes, whatever your preferred method of communication, because a lot of these steps need to move pretty succinctly in order for it to work. And so answering Mickey and being as flexible as possible with match meeting times on both sides is really critical.
Really important. Absolutely. And again, if email is not your preferred method of communication, no problem. Call or text is also an option.
In addition to the education that we provide to you about the pre-match process, I think it's also important to remember that your case manager is going to reach out after your match meeting has been scheduled to just kind of prep you and just ask if you've got any kind of last minute questions. Some of the things that they might cover are going to be the childcare during the meeting. Listen, we're all moms. If you weren't a mom, you wouldn't be a surrogate candidate. But there does need to be an ability for you to intentionally be present on this call. So if you've got young children that need your attention, you need to facilitate childcare or facilitate a time in which you can have not a child jumping on your lap, not distracting you or making the intended parents feel like they've got to get the call over as quickly as possible because you don't have the ability to kind of, multitask. We ask the same thing of intended parents. Some intended parents have children. So do try hard to schedule a meeting at a time in which you have an ability to really commit to a conversation. So, show up with the level of intensity and frankly intimacy that it deserves.
And I have conducted many match meetings with a surrogate in a car, but it's parked and it's not in the evening because lighting does matter. You want to be able to see and connect because it's really important that we be able to feel each other through the camera, through our virtual meetings. What I think Alcea does really, really well about helping to prepare you for a match meeting is you will have already had many conversations, evaluations, you've completed all of those things, and you have your surrogate mentor.
We also have a pre-match consultation specific packet within the parent portal and the surrogate portal that you can read that goes through all of the categories. So like if you don't know what you're looking for in the geography, It'll tell you, what states are safe, what states are not. Same thing with personality matches and some of the things that you can kind of start to think about in your brain. So you can think, all right, I have an appetite for this, but this makes me feel uncomfortable. Right. So there's definitely those resources. And then the final step before your match meeting, when your case manager reaches out, that's your time to kind of really speak then. All right, I'm nervous about this. I don't know about asking this question. If there are specific things that you want Mickey to ask the intended parent, or the intended parent wants to ask the surrogate before, it's absolutely completely acceptable to send that list to Mickey. Now remember, we only have about an hour. We can't ask, everything. But we've had intended parents and surrogates both say, after this hour, I think I need another hour to get to know the person and ask a few more questions. That's absolutely fine and acceptable. I think here at Alcea, we understand the criticality of this particular decision. I always remind everybody that once you're pregnant, you're in. So if you match with someone that you're not compatible with and you're pregnant with their child, you have to find a way to make it work. So the best job that we can do and what we owe you and the intended parent is the best preparation to ensure you can make the best decision in the part.
And I'll have a list of how the flow of our meeting will go. We'll just do a general meet and greet, just try to shake those nerves out. And then we'll talk about what's your motivation and how surrogacy fits into your lifestyle currently, for your doctor's appointments, your visits, who's going to take care of your children while you do medical screening and embryo transfer, because most of the time you're traveling out of state, or oftentimes will. And then we'll go right into relationship expectations. What kind of relationship are you hoping for before, during, and after the journey? We'll talk about communication. What's your style? Are we emoji heavy on our texts? Sometimes we'll also have a conversation about social. Are we going to connect socially on media, Facebook, Instagram? And again, we like to push pause a little bit for reflection, because most surrogates are a lot of them are people pleasers, and we don't want to just be people pleasy. We want to really, really own what is our comfort levels and our wishes and wants. After communication style, we're going to talk about the fun stuff, how many embryos we have, where your IVF clinic is, where transfer will take place, and then you as surrogate telling us about your labors, your deliveries, your hopes for a surrogacy delivery, who's going to be in the room, who's your support person, and then post-relationship expectations and what that's going to look like. Is that an annual hello birthday card, holiday card, or is that let's just leave it open and organically develop? And then we'll end on usually family support, your nutrition, lifestyle, health, exercise, and then I open it up for any other conversations. Oftentimes we cover who's your pet, who's the puppy dog or the kitty cat that just jumped in frame, and we'll cover some of those. So as a mental health professional and facilitator of your match call, one of the things that Alcea really wants to emphasize, that we do emphasize, is we want to make sure that not just the clinical checklist or the journey checklist, but the personality piece is really important. Again, very special relationship between a surrogate and intended parents. Lots of things can happen.
Part of our mental health evaluation of the surrogate is not only to understand fitness for process, it's also to learn a little bit more about personality, to put more tools in our tool belt for matching. Because it's very important, some intended parents, they want to be in the driver's seat. They want to be in the middle of everything, driving everything, and that might not be comfortable for all surrogates. Others want us as the agency to handle everything, and that means the surrogate might need to take more of the driver's seat. So we also talk a lot about expectations and kind of what are the rules of the road, and make sure that the rules of the road align between those two people that are having a match meeting. I will say on the match meeting, there are some ASRM as well as clinic mandatory questions. And so those are going to be some of the things that your clinic requires that we have asked and confirmed you're on the same page on before they will approve the match officially. So those are going to be some of the more technical things. They really want to understand about what the termination choices are going to be, and if everyone's on the same page about if the intended parent made the choice to terminate a pregnancy for whatever reason, that the surrogate is okay with that. Most clinics want to confirm relationship expectations, and that everyone is on the same page about about kind of communication style. They're also ensuring that they feel as if this is a good gel or a good mix, that the type A and the type B can work together. I think this is also a really important time to talk about how when we have discussed things like birth planning or testing during pregnancy that might be over and above the typical care plan in the pre-match, this is the time that we get verbal confirmation that the surrogate is okay with whatever the intended parent might be asking. So be prepared. If the intended parent is wanting to maybe have an amnio, that they might ask you, your profile said you're open to invasive testing even if the doctor doesn't request it. So there could be those types of things. Anything in pre-match that was a little bit outside of boundary, that's when we're going to confirm that everybody was on the same page. So like a home birth or a delivery outside of a hospital.
Water birth.
Those are things that are not typical in a surrogacy agreement, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. If we find two people that really want that same approach, that's when it's going to be discussed, kind of anything that are outside the bounds of those typical questions. And if there's anything super important to either party, we usually end by making sure that there is space to talk about those specific things. So I think we've done a really good job of talking about how we prep you, all that goes into the pre-match process, deciding your matching choices, and ultimately the match meeting. After that match meeting, if you decide it's a match, you're going to communicate that to Mickey. Mickey will then communicate that to the team, and the real fun begins. So after that, and we officially confirm the match, you're going to move into your rules of engagement call on both sides, and that's going to be with our legal administrator as well as your respective case manager. So the intended parent will meet her case manager, the surrogate will meet their case manager, and the legal administrator is going to go through everything that's going to happen over the period of the next 2 to 4 months. Sometimes after the match meeting, I know everyone is so excited to get started, but there is a little bit of window of administrative time that intended parents need to officially onboard. We need to get your match sheet and all of your demographics over to their clinic. They're going to need to open and fund escrow so that you're protected. So usually from the time that you match to the time that you're getting communication from the clinic is about 2 weeks. In about 2 weeks, you're going to get communication from the clinic as well as our clinic coordination team to begin thinking about what medical screening will look like. When you'll travel, what kind of time frame that's going to happen, if your partner needs to be present, and we'll begin to really take the next steps into medical screening. But immediately after that match is confirmed, you'll have a little bit of downtime, you'll meet your case manager, and then we'll begin to start talking about next steps, which is going to be that medical screening process.
After conducting several hundred match meetings, you could get a strong sense of when there's compatibility or a particular issue may on the front end have an incompatibility issue. We just have to build language and support system to be able to facilitate a way through some
and that's why you support these people all the way through the journey.
All the way through the journey.
The way we have Alcea set up is that you are doing these match meetings intentionally. Most agencies have a case manager or someone that isn't credentialed like you do that, and you stay the support mental health resource from then all the way through postpartum. So it's not like you're meeting someone at 20 weeks who's going through a loss for the first time.
Right.
They know you, they've had conversation with you, and you know them and you know their backstory. So there's an opportunity to have a continuity of care that I think doesn't happen at a lot of agencies.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, my job is not to make sure that the match meeting is successful. My job is to facilitate a good, thorough, honest conversation to help both parties be able to really show up in their most comfortable and, again, meaningful way so that the truth of your compatibility can show up. Yeah. And that's what we're most interested in. As Alcea's in-house mental health provider, I hold my license in PhD in clinical social work, and I'm also a licensed therapist. So part of the things that I want to emphasize for everybody is that, again, surrogates have had beautiful pregnancies. They love being pregnant. Everything's gone really, really well. But with many intended parents, they have had traumas. They've had a lot of loss. Some have not. Some have just medical situations that make it impossible for them to even attempt to have a pregnancy. Our same-sex intended parents, being one of those. So there may not be any trauma, but if is some, if again, when you're considering which profiles to accept, if you have a tender heart, or there is your relationship to somebody that might have a lot of anxiousness or sadness, and you just want somebody that's just joyful and excited, we need to know that. But if you can also make space and we could have lots of conversations around being able to care for a family that is just emotionally needs a lot of love and support through that journey. But they may not bring in a lot of like, yay, I'm so excited, because they haven't had a lot of excitement along the way.
Yeah. And
so those are some things to consider.
You have to be a person that can hold space for that. And you have to be a person that is not necessarily looking for that type of validation in this process. And how it pertains to a match meeting is there does need to be some sensitivity and questions. Yes. And that match meeting, it feels overwhelming, but it really should just be conversational in nature. It should be, I'm meeting someone for the first time, and what do I really want to know about them on top of those basic questions. If there's something that you'd like to ask it. It's important that you are able to really learn enough about the person you're speaking to make this really impactful decision. Let's talk about some challenges. So, the majority of matches at Alcea, around 97 to 98%, are choosing the very first person that they have a match meeting with. I think that speaks to our diligent pre-match process and how well we get to know our candidates prior to putting them in the position to speak to someone. But in those ones that you've seen not work out, tell us a little bit about maybe some of the things that, besides just non-compatibility, maybe pitfalls, tips and tricks, things that you've seen over the past 5 or 6 years that maybe we could talk about for surrogates.
I think some of the biggest challenges I see in the match meeting section is that as a surrogate, if something does change in your life, a death in your family, a job change, a job loss, your partnership or your marriage changes, stress, there's no instant gratification in surrogacy. It's a lot of patience. And if you thought it was going to look one way and you've begun to understand the complicated, nuanced part of
potential delays, they're out of their control.
A lot of things that happen. It's not for the faint of heart. So I think what happens is we just are so excited, but then you lose a lot of that excitement along the way. And so what I want to say is the biggest barrier that I see in surrogacy at this point is surrogates have gotten tired. They feel like it's been 4 weeks. Why haven't my records been
I've just given you all of this intrusive information. You've asked me about who I have sex with, what drugs I've done. For the last 4 to 6 months, potentially, I've given you every piece of information. I just want to have this match meeting, and the clinic is taking a month for the records. And it's like they slowly start to get, I don't want to use the word salty, but they're getting frustrated that things are taking so long. And then they show up to that match meeting with that being accessible on their face or maybe in the way that they speak. And so those are things that, what we want to make sure surrogates know is there's a lot going on the back end, and we are pushing. And so believe me, we want it to go faster as well, but surrogacy is a lot of hurry up and wait for a reason. Compliance, T's and I's need to be crossed in order for this to be safe. And so sometimes we're at the mercy of a clinic or an attorney or something completely outside our control. So just stay in close contact with your case manager if you're starting to get frustrated, but don't always jump to conclusions or jump to any conclusions about the why things are being elongated. Ask questions, be curious, because I think that's going to make you feel a lot better and more content with the process.
And if something has changed in your life,
communicate it.
Definitely communicate that. No one's going to get in trouble that we've spent a lot of time with you preparing. And if something unexpected happens, that's okay. We are here to support you through the entire journey. And if that means your journey ends right before a match meeting, that's okay too. On occasion, things get more serious, things get more real. And so if a partner really hasn't done their own research and they start to feel like, I don't know about this, what about medications? Wait a minute, there are shots I have to give? If they're uninformed and that shows up during our call, that's when often we we have to take a pause.
Yeah, and I will say one of the intended parents' number one concern is a surrogate support system. I think with any pregnancy, you think about, you know, the stress of life, and what they're looking for is someone that has an outlet for that stress. And typically speaking, your partner is one of the most, if not the most, you know, strongest type of support you have. And so if an intended parent senses that your partner's not on board for this journey, that could also give them a bit of trepidation. And the same goes for the surrogate. I tell intended parents to make sure that they make it clear to the surrogate that everyone is on board with this journey, that they are both excited to move forward with surrogacy, and that no one feels that this is not the right process for their family.
Right.
It's about making sure you're showing that level of commitment on this call.
That's right.
It's also about trust, not only trust in you, but trust in the agency. You've been asked at application and in screening that, you know, what kind of work you do if you're partnered. We confirm that information once you're medically cleared. If we have been working under the assumption and have provided a profile to an intended parent that you're a working partnered person, and you get to the match meeting and you're no longer a working partnered person, by no means are we saying that there is intentional dishonesty. It could very well just be an oversight of not understanding the criticality and importance of letting us know. But those intended parents accepted your profile for certain details and certain characteristics and boundaries, the same way that if the intended parent showed up and said, I told you I was married, but now I'm not, you would feel some kind of way. So it's just really important that if you look at your profile and everything that we presented to the intended parent as the details of your life, if things about that have changed, let's give Mickey or your case manager a heads up so that we're not getting that information at the match meeting.
During the call.
That's
Yes,
right, because
that's right.
at that time, it's this first impression, and you don't want there to be a first impression that there is any kind of, you know, unintentional dishonesty or frankly, a lack of attention to detail, because that's also sometimes something that intended parents have concerns about. So one other thing I think that it's really important for us to all remember, IP and GC, is cultural differences. So yes, the majority of intended parents with Alcea do live in the United States, but just because you live in the United States does not mean that you are Caucasian, English as your first language. And so we have an incredibly diverse pool of intended parents and of surrogates. And so I think it's really important to, especially when it comes to language barriers, to remember that, you know, sometimes intended parents ask questions in ways that might not come across in a culturally sensitive way, but to take a step back and understand what they're truly trying to ask. And I think Mickey does a really good job of navigating and helping to kind of be a conduit of interpretation between the two. But if that type of communication is something that makes you feel highly uncomfortable on the match call, that might make you feel highly uncomfortable during the duration of the journey, because this is not something that they're doing to be unkind or this intentional way to be insensitive. It's truly cultural differences. And so just like if there's something about your ethnicity, the way you eat, your religion, that you'd like to have that honored and respected, intended parents feel the same way. So be open and honest. And I know that sometimes feels like kind of a sticky thing to talk about. And if it's not something that you're comfortable asking more about on the call, call Mickey after the fact and say, hey, this made me uncomfortable. How are we going to get past that? Or I can't get past that. But cultural sensitivity and just sensitivity to the diversity of the pool of people that you're going to meet and deal with in surrogacy is really important. Your doctor, your social worker, there's going to be a lot of people in this process. And so just making sure that you're remembering kind of that particular piece and in helping it to be more comfortable for all parties.
And speaking of sticky topics, I would just say generally, this is an extremely unique relationship. You're talking about your body. You're talking about hopes and wishes. The whole thing is going to be really personal on both sides. And so again, that's why we try to set everybody at ease by all of the conversations that we've had prior to meeting your intended parent or your surrogate. So I just wanted to say that. It's like, it's so personal. And so remember, we put you together for a reason, and it's okay if it's not a fit. But I do want to just to communicate like that we've told everybody all the personal stuff so that you could drop in and really show up as if your best friend set you up on a date, That's what we did.
Show up authentically,
Show up authentic.
show up intentionally, and show up engaged. Because even if this match doesn't work out, this is your first impression of both sides. And it's just really important that the engagement necessary for surrogacy is shown through the enthusiasm of your participation. And it also should be part of making sure that you use this as the time is intended, and that's to truly get to know the other person that you could potentially be working with.
That's right. My favorite part of this process in the match call is when everyone's feeling it. Everyone knows that it's all clicking, and we all can feel it. It's palpable.
Like you just know it's
the
best
so,
match.
It's so energetic, and everybody is so excited. And just being a part of that, process, and seeing and witnessing the, oh my gosh, this is going to happen.
The match meeting is such a huge win for intended parents because it takes a lot of effort and time and money to get to a successful match. The average intended parent goes to a couple of agencies. Many, many people in our pipeline are still on a long waiting list at another agency. They've been given a lot of promises. They've had a lot of disappointment. 25 to 35% of surrogate profiles are declined by the IVF clinic at other agencies. That means 2 to 3 out of 10 intended parents are getting excited about a profile and never being able to make it to the match meeting because their IVF doctor declined the profile. Luckily at Alcea, that's less than 1%, all in, 8% total if you look at the year. So it's not a high likelihood, but when you've kind of got your heart set on meeting this person, and even though you've only seen them on paper, and you get to the step where your clinic has actually approved them, you meet them, they're real people, and I believe that it's at this point intended parents are like, wow, this could actually be real. This person on this Zoom call could be carrying my child. And I just think that the emotions of that are something that people who have never been through surrogacy actually can't understand. There's nothing I can say or articulate to help people feel that feeling if you're not involved in the day over day. But seeing how much everyone goes through to get to that successful match, obviously surrogates come into it with a different mindset and a different background, but there's also been a lot of disappointment on their end, and sometimes matches that break, failed transfers, lots of things that maybe elongated their matching journey. So to have two people in this huge universe, where these little people on this floating rock find one another and say, we are compatible enough for you to bring my child earthside, I just can't think of a bigger win than finding that. It's a needle in a haystack, and I think being able to feel comfortable and confident with your partner is just an enormous win. Thanks so much for watching, and please consider subscribing. In the next video, we'll cover your first trip to the IVF clinic and what to expect during medical screening.